Welcome to the Temple Mount podcast. This is another session in our ongoing World of Darkness campaign, which you can find on the Temple Mount official BitChute and YouTube channel and the Temple Mount podcast. If you want to join the game and you're listening to this and you think it sounds cool, come join the server, come join the game. Today we have a special one-on-one session happening behind the scenes without the knowledge of the other players in the campaign. And joining me today is my friend, Shad Viano-Feroth of Host Premier and Sile of Host Premier. So, can you start us out with a book, scripture reading from the Tome of Knowledge?
Certainly. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." Or what king, going out to encounter another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000?
That's deep, man. That's like the art of war from the Bible. So, Mr. Shad Viano-Feroth and Sile of Host Premier, please give us a quick recap of your last gaming session.
Sure. So, the events of Cascadia City, or G-City, are turbulent, to say the least. And some of this is caused by Shad, and some of it is most certainly not. There are Sabbat factions, neutral factions, and the ongoing level of distrust within the Camarilla that are contributing to a lot of volatility behind the scenes, and certainly a lot of plots being devised, only few of which are only now being uncovered. But the party, consisting of Shad, Sid Rogers, Lucy Fairbrook, and Newell Boone, had at one point agreed to withdraw from the city in its current chaos to find some respite at Newell Boone's ranch. Unfortunately, Newell Boone left with a note saying he was fleeing a long-held enemy who was hot on his trail, and so we have no means to pursue him, most of all because we do not know the location of the ranch. And so the party, being stuck in the city, went about its normal actions, rising during the night, feeding. But on this night, they went back to Lucy Fairbrook's home in her crystal shop, where at the pronunciation of the word Gehenna, which refers to the eschatological view that Kindred hold regarding the end times and the rise of the antediluvians, the book that Shad had stolen from the Setites fell off and opened to a page that seemed similar to the serpent that was present at the ritual. With some investigation, Shad realized that this ritual in the book was for summoning a demon, and with additional study realized that it was actually a separate ritual from the blasphemous communion that was taking place. So, with not a clear picture of what's going on here, and without the time to tie it all together, Shad is making incremental progress on that front. On top of this, Shad has run into a character a few times now who's definitely crazy, but also seems to be in some ways more sane in his gait and in his presence and in his purpose than many of the other kindred and characters that have been present in the story thus far. Finally, Shad received a text from his contact in the Sabbat, who definitely know him, and he may not know who they are, to present himself to the bishop within 1 week, the bishop of the nearby city Arcadia, which is a Sabbat-controlled city. Shad is determined to do this without the presence of the party. For his own purposes and for the purposes of their safety.
All right, and where did you end up at the end of our last session, or where do you begin in this session?
For fear of intrusion at the Tremere Chantry House, Shad is staying with Lucy Fairbrook in her crystal shop, and he has received a staff, a wooden staff from Lucy, which he's now carrying with him, in addition to several books, which don't fit in a small computer bag, but instead require a full-on backpack, which he dons, and as he rises, attempts to slip out of the house before the other two arise.
All right, so you put on a backpack, you pack up your supplies at the Chantry House, at the Crystal Shop, and you walk out into the night of Cascadia City on July 7th, which is a Friday. The moon is waning. You walk out onto the campus. You leave the library and esoteric hermetics department of the University of Cascadia. You walk through the quad, the courtyard. The current time is about midnight. The sun is fully down. It's dark. There's still a few students hanging out in the quad, probably people who live in the nearby dorms. Young people sitting at picnic tables or on the grass, but just a few of them. Where are you heading?
So I turn to a few of them and I say, "There's a concert starting here tonight, shortly, isn't there? The Children of Ecstasy, I believe, are throwing it."
They look at you. It's a young man and a young woman, probably, boyfriend and girlfriend, sitting on the grass, and they say, "Yeah, I've heard those are crazy parties. I've heard the Children of Ecstasy are supposed to have the best drugs, on campus. They say they still have Orange Sunshine from the '60s that was in Kinsey's, traveling carnival. I can't remember what they called it, but I've never been invited to one of those parties. I thought it was just a myth."
Yeah, supposedly it's a flash party. I'm not sure if it has the university's approval or not, but it should be right here in only a few hours.
Well, they look at you with interest, and the guy looks at the girl with excitement on his face and is like, "Wow, maybe we can attend one of these parties. We should hang out here for another hour." And they look at you, and the guy has a joint in his hands. You can smell the burning marijuana, and he offers you the joint.
"No thanks, none for me. Have a good day, or night," I say as I leave.
The girl smiles at you and raises one hand and does a little wave with her fingers, and then the guy turns his attention back to her.
So I want to position myself near the Tremere Chantry House, maybe in between there and a sewer, and look for the emissary from King Rat, who said he would come by the Tremere Chantry House to pick up one of the photocopied documents I have in the backpack.
Okay, so you move away from the young people you were just speaking of, who are in the quad in the center of the campus, which is the part that's directly in front of where they're sitting. Looks like a castle. It's all made of old stone. It's got battlements and towers, and that's the Collegiate Institute. And there's a series of flags blowing in the wind in front of it. Some of them you recognize, some of them you don't. You walk back towards the Tremere Chantry House, which is your domain and the domain of your clan. And you're sort of looking around for anyone out of the ordinary, and you don't see anybody out of the ordinary. However, you see a woman. She looks maybe a middle-aged First Nations woman, wrinkled face. She's wearing an orange jacket, even though it's heat of the summer. She's wearing what looks like a winter type jacket, and she's walking through the passageway or streets where they've done some art on the ground. There's some paintings on the ground that were done probably by students or whatever. And I'll have you go ahead and roll like perception or alertness or whatever that you have in terms of sense skills.
Okay, I'll do that in one moment.
Say difficulty 6.
Three successes, including one great success.
All right. So as you look around and you see the various people, not too many of them, but still a few hanging out in the campus, the First Nations lady in the orange jacket stands out to you because of the way that she seems sort of out of place, and she's standing not directly beside, but somewhat close to the door that you just exited that leads to the Chantry House. And as she senses you sort of looking around, she makes eye contact with you and sort of stands there looking at you and maintaining eye contact. And you have a feeling that this is possibly someone who normally wouldn't be on the campus. They seem out of place.
I nod at her, making eye contact, and unzip my bag, take out just the documents that I'm supposed to deliver, close my backpack back up, put it back on, and walk over there. As I'm approaching her, do I see or smell anything strange about her that would identify her as a sewer rat?
She looks, to all intents and purposes, like a middle-aged First Nations woman with, ordinary clothes, but you do pick up a smell of sewage. Somewhat faint, but it's definitely a noticeable smell of what you can only describe as sewage.
I shove the documents into her chest and say, "It's for your boss. I'm heading to Arcadia now."
He looks at you and says, and she puts the documents that you gave her inside of her jacket, but then she holds her hands out and says, "Can you spare any change?"
No.
She says, "How about a cigarette? You have a cigarette?"
I do not. There's some kids with some pot back in the quad, but don't you have more pressing matters to attend to?
She kind of smiles and holds like both hands out and does like a weird little, almost like a dance motion where she's sort of shaking back and forth, and then she just sort of walks off in the direction of the quad and leaves you behind.
Trusting that the document made it into the right hands and that this can be sorted out regardless once he meets the Bishop of Arcadia, Shad takes an Uber, grabs an Uber to...
I'll tell you one thing that's true about the Cascadia University is that directly, if you're looking at the Cascadia University from the front, directly to your right side is a Greyhound bus station. So this has buses that go to other locations within Canada, just so you know.
And they're operating at this time of night?
Yeah, they leave at various times throughout the day and night.
Okay. So I'm thinking it's pretty early still, but regardless, I'll grab a Greyhound ticket over to Arcadia.
All right, so the ticket is not that expensive. It comes to about $70. Arcadia City is actually only about 30 minutes away, so it's actually kind of overpriced, but it's a comfortable ride. And you notice that the next bus to Arcadia City is leaving in just about 20 minutes, which gives you just enough time to buy a ticket, check your baggage, and get onto the bus. It's a full-length bus, air-conditioned, leather seats. There's a handful of other people. Most of them seem to be sleeping, probably traveling through from a longer trip, either sleeping or trying to sleep. You can stow your baggage in like an overhead compartment, and you take a seat somewhere in the middle of the bus.
I'll just keep the backpack right on my lap and hold my staff that I'm pretending to use as some sort of like walking stick. Okay, even affect a little lazy gait with it as I walk. I find a seat alone near the back of the bus.
You manage to find a seat alone near the back of the bus. There's a restroom, bathroom at the back of the bus. The driver's at the front. about 15 minutes until you leave. You'd estimate there's about a dozen people through a quick head count on the bus. None of them appear unusual. They just seem to be ordinary passengers. And so you wait on the bus with your ticket, and a few minutes later the bus rolls out of the bus station, drives past Cascadia University, and exits the city to the west. And you sort of watch the urban scenery pass by, and within a relatively short period of time, you exit the city limits. You drive under an underpass that says, welcome to Cascadia City, and you're on your way towards Arcadia. And for the first, 10 or 15 minutes of the trip, you see farmers' fields on either side, grain fields and canola fields. But before too long, on both sides, you see forest. Most of the trees are not that big. They've been logged in the past, but you are now in the countryside, and it's forested on both sides. The ride to Cascadia City should only take about half an hour.
Sit back and relax, taking in the scenery and keeping an eye out for anybody that's potentially threatening or acting strange on the ride over.
So I'm going to have you roll one more perception check. Whatever you rolled last time, same check. Fail. No successes?
One success, one critical fail.
Okay. So you divide your attention between looking out the window and keeping an eye on the other passengers on the bus. One of the passengers on the bus stands up and walks to the back to use the restroom, and he kind of looks at you for a minute, makes eye contact as he passes, but nothing really unusual. Goes into the bathroom. You look out the window, and you think for a fraction of a second, after about 15 more minutes, that you see something standing in the shadows on the side of the highway, but you think it must have either been your imagination. It was just a tall, dark shape, which might have just been a figment of your imagination, but you thought you saw something standing in the woods.
I inhale and watch the breath mist across the bus window in between me and the now fading scene, and think to myself, a Sabbat-run city. I haven't seen one of these in a long time. I wonder how they're keeping their cover, or if they're even attempting to at this point at all.
So as you contemplate these issues, the scenery flies by. You pass forested areas, a number of small lakes, river that you cross over. Cascadia is also known as the land of 10,000 lakes, and you pass a number of them, some big, some small, including the Great Lakes, which are so big that you can't even see to the other shore. So you pass one of the Great Lakes, and it almost looks like a sea. You can't see to the other side. Huge freshwater lake. But it's about 1 o'clock, and before too long, you pass the lake, and your bus pulls into another Greyhound bus terminal, and the driver announces that you have arrived at Arcadia City, and you pass, the entry sign, "Welcome to Arcadia City." The city looks similar to Cascadia City, at first glance, at least the part that you've come into. Relatively upscale neighborhoods that you pass on the way in, some industrial sections, and you come to stop at the Greyhound bus station, which is also close to the campus of Miskatonic University.
I get off the campus and take a look around. How are the do I know where the center of downtown is compared to the university?
Yeah, you have your cell phone, so you can easily check using GPS or whatever, and you realize that if you were to walk to the center of the downtown district of Arcadia City, it would only probably take you 15 minutes of walking to arrive there from where you are, which is on the outskirts of the Miskatonic campus.
Well, I do so, and on the way I hunt.
All right, so you're trying to hunt so roll a hunting check, whatever. We'll say you need a 7 to find somebody, even a 6, potentially.
which is what again? Wits plus something?
I'm not sure, but you can roll a hunting roll of 1d10.
Oh, that's what it was, that 1d10.
Yeah.
And then you add stuff to it or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you think would be right to add to it, wits or perception.
Well, I rolled an 8 anyway, so.
Alright.
I think that's how we did it last time. It was just the d10.
So as you're walking, you notice that there are, as there are in Cascadia City, fully enclosed and heated glass bus shacks. Little bus shacks. And this one has the sides broken out, like someone shattered the glass, and there's like piles of broken glass. And inside one of these bus shacks, you notice a person, First Nations person, unconscious, lying on the bus bench, just like passed out. And then on the ground, there's like some garbage, some detritus, some used needles, etc. But the person is unconscious.
Well, I look around and then shrug to myself, finding it silly that I'm even attempting to be subtle in a Sabbat-controlled city, and say to myself, when in Rome, and laugh at the inside joke. I take my first drink of the passed out kind's blood.
Okay, so you can drain as many blood points as you wish during this feeding. There doesn't appear to be anyone around. A couple cars drive by on the road, but they're periodic, and for the most part at this time of night, there's no cars on the road.
Well, I will start with one to check the potency of the drugs that are in his system. I don't want to be overly affected when I go and introduce myself to the bishop.
So you drink 1 pint of the kind's blood and add that to your blood pool. You do feel like a warm, fuzzy euphoria and a sense of sedation. And you can tell that this person is on some kind of like opiate drug. So that makes the feeding even more euphoric than it normally would be. And I guess I'll have you roll or spend a willpower point to resist the desire to drink more, because not only is this vitae, which is addictive to kindred, or at least, euphoric, but it also has an opiate in it, which is, reinforcing. You only need a 6 to resist the desire to feed more.
Damn, I failed, dude. I got 4. I have a willpower pool of 8, and I got 4 critical failures and 3 successes.
All right. So as the vitae passes your lips and you feel the extreme euphoria of some kind of heroin analog, possibly.
Get out.
You're
back.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll say you roll 4 failures, so you drink 4 points of blood before you're able to tear yourself away from the kind's neck, and you can therefore will have to apply a -2 roll to certain checks for the next at least hour or 2.
I look at the largely exsanguinated individual here, knowing that they will likely die in the freezing night with almost half of their blood missing, and coolly straighten up, snap my frock, and continue walking towards the downtown area.
All right. Just to be difficult about it, I'll have you roll like a humanity check, which can be like your composure or your willpower, and you're only going to need like a 7.
All right, I'll roll my willpower again. Hopefully this time it'll not be so bad. Okay, I got it.
All right, so as you callously exsanguinate this drug addict in the cold and realize that he may not survive, you kind of mentally shrug and think, what's one more dead kind? The kind who pursue these kind of drugs want to die anyway, so what is it if I am the instrument of their death? I'm probably doing them a favor, and you justify to yourself. or at least those are the thoughts that go through your internal monologue as you turn your back on the individual. But at the same time, you think, but he'll probably survive. He'll be all right.
I approach the downtown area and I guess describe to me like what this center looks like. Is there a primary building that's obvious that the bishop would be in, or do I need to try to find some kindred contacts first?
Well, the downtown area, right, it's currently Friday night, so this is prime time, and the downtown area is one of the major areas where people go to party. So there's quite a few people on the streets, and there's a large building that's lit up, and it has a shark as like a mascot that's lit up and like a sign, and it says the Shark Club. And it seems like this is the biggest sort of nightlife spot here. It's called the Shark Club. It says sports bar and lounge. And there's, a few people hanging out in front of it. There's also another smaller venue to the left that says the Voodoo Lounge. So there's the Shark Club, the Voodoo Lounge, and a strip. The rest of the strip is a mall, and the mall is currently closed. But the things that are open are the Voodoo Club and the Shark Club.
I will enter the Voodoo Club.
All right, so the Voodoo Club, the Voodoo Lounge, has the image of like a skeleton wearing like a top hat and a suit, all lit up in like purple fluorescent, and it says the Voodoo Lounge. There's 3 people outside. One of them is sitting in like a wheelchair, and the other 2 are standing, and they're sort of having a cigarette, and they like, kind of look at you as you approach. And there's a door open, and inside you can see like a receptionist type person with and there's like a red velvet rope that you can see.
A red velvet rope?
Yeah, like there's like a rope indicating the entrance, right? It's okay. Lateral. Yeah.
So I'll approach and introduce myself. Hello, I'm new in this town, I say as I tracked out my fangs and flashed a smile with them in it, hardly perceptible to anybody except those who would be paying attention.
So the woman just sort of smiles at you and says, "Welcome to the Voodoo Lounge. There's a VLT Lounge on the left," and she indicates with her hands the bar straight ahead. She says there's a $10 entrance fee.
Surely, I say as I pause for a moment, looking at her expression, and then whip out my wallet and give her $10.
She smiles and offers to stamp your hand with like a hand stamp to indicate that you paid your entry fee.
I give her the back of my left wrist.
He stamps your hand with a skull and crossbones and says, "Okay, have a good night. Enjoy yourself." So
I kind of laugh a little bit looking down at the stamp and make a joke to myself about, is this the powerful Sabat Eschaton ink stamps on hands in nightclubs? It seems no different than anything that the Camarilla has going on.
So you think this to yourself, and so basically the area in front of you is divided into a gaming lounge to your right, and then there's like a bar with tables and chairs with people in it and a stage. And on the stage there's like live music, and it's some kind of like sort of black rock, black metal, death metal. You can't really classify the genre, but it's like very like, it's not electronic music. It's like sort of like satanic rock music, you might say. And inside, you notice the aesthetic of the people is that everybody's wearing like black, like ragged denim. A lot of people seem to have like a whole bunch of patches on their jackets, but they're not like motorcycle gang or gang patches. They're like music patches. But they all have sort of like the same like dark aspect to them. Like, it's hard to explain, but they're kind of like chaotic looking images that they have, patched onto a lot of them. And there's a lot of, notice a lot of piercings, a lot of tattoos, a lot of dyed hair, a little bit of a rougher, darker crowd than what you're used to at the Pyramid nightclub.
I'll pick a I'll lean up against the wall near the back of the room with the stage in it and keep my eye out for any illicit activity, including drug use, prostitution, but more so than use is people who are selling it.
Well, you take a, nondescript position in the bar where you get a good view. And I guess you'll have to roll some kind of like investigation or perception to try and read, the flow of illicit drugs or activities in the busy, noisy area.
All right, I'll make another perception roll. 1 success.
All right, so as you are looking at the dance floor, you notice in the opposite side of the club a man. It's sort of a skinny young man, you estimate. Probably 19 to 21 years old. He's very thin, his hair is all dyed like a platinum kind of blonde, and he has tattoos on his face. But you notice him being kind of handoff on the other side of the bar that looks to you like some kind of illicit drug deal or something of that nature.
I walk over. Do I have time to like actually intercept the drug handoff, or is it already done by the time I get to the...
So you see the skinny younger man hand something to a somewhat older, larger, more heavily built man who puts whatever he received into his jeans pocket as you're crossing the floor and before you arrive. So the handoff has been made.
I just walk up to the two of them and I say, "Oh, well, what was that?"
So they both look at you. The man looks at you with sort of like neutral interest, perhaps thinking that you're a potential customer, but the person who just received the handoff looks at you with like suspicion and anger, like, who is this person, like, interfering with my business?
I'm sorry, I mean no offense. You see, I'm new in this city, and I give the same flash with my unretracted fang on the side of my mouth, particularly on the right side to the kid. And I say, "I've got this terrible pain in my knee, as you can see." And I point to the staff that I'm holding on to. I could really use some help with it. And if you could show me around the town, that would be helpful too.
And the guy says, "You looking for up or down?" And he kind of like looks at you like curiously.
Well, now that you mention it, up might be more helpful. I don't have a ride, and I'll be doing a lot of walking, I think.
So the guy who just received the handoff kind of like turns and walks away from you, like leaves and goes back down to the dance floor. And the guy says, "Well, I got speed if you want some."
Sure.
So he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a bag and he says, "How much do you need?"
I think a point will do me.
He says, "A point? I'm selling this stuff by the gram, man."
All right, okay. A gram is fine.
All right, so he asks for $60.
I give him the $60.
He takes the 3 green $20 Canadian bills, puts them in his pocket, and hands you the bag of white powder, which is, looks like about a gram.
Hey, thanks. Can I ask, and again, forgive me for being so rude, where did you get this from?
He says, "Well, the best stuff comes from the bikers. The guys on the street are selling jib. It's mostly fucking garbage, bathtub shit. But if you want the good stuff, I get it straight from the source, from the biker gangs."
Oh, we have some of those back home as well. They're, let's just say a little disheveled at the moment. Could you introduce me?
He says, "You want me to introduce you to the MC?"
The MC? Is that his nickname?
No, he says the motorcycle club, the 88.
Sure. I could use some more friends in this city.
He looks at you with like a skeptical, appraising look, and he looks you all the way from head to toe, and he goes, "The 88, they're not to be messed with. I can't just be introducing anybody, like, my reputation's on the line. I don't know you, man. Like, for all I know, you're a cop or something.
I assure you I am no cop. What is your name?
He says he looks like he's thinking, so you can tell he's not telling you his real name, and he just goes, "You can call me John, but on the streets they call me Dip."
Yep, that's fine. My name is Shad. Perhaps you could just point me in the direction of this MC, and I'll forget this meeting ever occurred.
He kind of thinks for a second, nods slowly, and he says, "Well, the Hellhounds, the 88, you can find them over at the Red Cactus, usually. They own that place, but you better come correct if you go in there because, that's a rough crowd."
John, how old are you?
He says, "Well, I don't know what business that is of yours."
Shad, also looking like a very young man himself, is just curious, and he states that it's actually none of mine, but for young folk like ourselves, I say with a pregnant pause and a kind of investigatory narrowing of my eyes, it could be relevant.
He nods. He says, "I'm 20. I turned 21 in a couple months."
I see. Well, happy birthday, I say, and I stroll off to this cactus club out the front door.
So you walk out through the heavy, industrial black metal, all the dancing people. You weave your way outside of the crowd, leaving behind the drug dealer. Following his instructions, you walk down the main downtown strip, and before long you see a relatively smaller venue called the Red Cactus. Has a cactus, logo, whatever, and there's a small outside patio where people are drinking and smoking, as well as a door leading inside.
Well, I go in and take a seat and order just a glass of water, and look around for any potential kindred movements, whoever seems to kind of have authority here is what I'm in particular keeping an eye out for.
So a waitress with a short black denim sort of mini skirt and tight black shirt, crop top, whatever, serves you your glass of water and kind of looks at you with, somewhat exasperated look when you only order water, but she brings you ice water. As you look around, you see what look like just sort of normal young people drinking, but you also notice in the back, in sort of a smoky, shadowy alcove at the back of the bar, what look like some bikers. There's 4 of them sitting together. They've got bottle service, and they've got a big bottle of bourbon on the table, and they're drinking. And even though there's clearly no smoking signs, one of them is smoking a cigar. Doesn't seem to be being stopped by anybody.
I walk up to the group and present myself even a little bit too close, maybe, to the table for proper etiquette, and kind of lean over and obviously interject myself into their conversation. Say, hello.
So
you take it that you are the 88?
So you notice on the front of their leather jackets, their leather vests that they're wearing over usually denim jackets, there's the image of Cerberus, the 3-headed hound. It's like a 3-headed dog with fire in the background on the front of their patches, that you can see facing you. And they kind of look at you with surprise, curiosity, and suspicion as you say 88, which you realize stands for HH, the 8th letter of the alphabet. And so the 88 stands for HH, and you put 2 and 2 together and realize that these are a motorcycle gang called the Hellhounds. And they say, who the fuck's asking? Says one of the individuals closest to you.
Just a friendly stranger, I say, as I kind of put my hand on his shoulder and begin circling the table and kind of tapping each one on the back. I'm just trying to be friendly and show the proper etiquette. You see, I'm new in town. Oh, and where are my manners? I say as I slap down, 1, the gram that I just bought, and 2, the bag of Calvin Klein, one of the extra bags of Calvin Klein that I had. This is for you. Enjoy. I believe one of these you'll be familiar with, but the other one is a speciality from my city.
And they look at two of the guys look at the drugs that you put on the table with like obvious interest and like enthusiasm. But the man who first talked to you says, "Oh yeah, you're new to the city, and where do you come from?"
G City.
G City, and the guy laughs and says, "Oh, he came from G City to Arcadia, and you're bringing drugs. Well," and then basically the 2 guys open the 1 bag that you gave them of the Calvin Klein and like start chopping up like lines behind the bottle, so it's sort of somewhat unobtrusive, but they don't seem to be like particularly hiding it. He says, "We don't get too many tourists from G City," and he looks at you with sort of like a knowing look. He says, "What brings you to Arcadia?"
Indeed, I'm no tourist. I'm looking to move here. Perhaps you could point me out a few of the agents that would be helpful with my move, I say, very thickly.
The guy looks at you with like a long, assessing look, similar to the look you received from the young drug dealer. He kind of looks you from head to toe. And he says, nothing's for free, especially in Arcadia City. And if you want information, it's going to cost you more than a couple bags of drugs.
Okay. What can I help you with? I'm a very resourceful person.
He says, "Are you looking to set up shop in Arcadia City and, make moves?"
Oh, no. I'm not here to disrupt whatever's going on. I just want to introduce myself to whomever's at the top, the very top, I say, with a pause, and see what I can do for him personally. My interests merely pertain to reading books. Nothing more obtrusive than that. I don't intend to run drugs or interfere with whatever your group has going on. I just need a place to study, I say with a wide smile, taking a step back.
He kind of grins incredulously and says, "Books? Do I look like a librarian to you? If you're looking for information of that kind, the Miskatonic University is where you're going to find it." And then he looks at you and he says, "But I have a feeling you're looking for more than just some old books. If you want to make introductions," and he kind of looks at you knowingly, he says, "you're going to want the theology department in the Miskatonic University. The shot caller in that particular domain is a woman by the name of Ashara, and if you introduce yourself to her, she can at least give you her blessing to visit the city."
Great. I do appreciate and didn't know that the leaders of this city were so studious. I'll make my way there. And a pleasure to meet you all.
And then he says, "Yeah, pleasure to meet you too, brother, but aren't you forgetting something?" And he kind of puts his hand out.
Are you asking me for money?
He just kind of nods and makes another gesture with his hand like, "Pay up."
I laugh. And take out a $100 bill and just slap it in his hand.
You slap a brownish gold-colored $100 bill into his hand, and he kind of looks at you with satisfaction and tucks it into his vest and turns back to his drink, pours himself a full glass of bourbon, and raises it to you in a mock toast. And he says, "Well, I hope you enjoy your time in Arcadia City." And the people around him laugh, like literally laugh out loud as one of them snorts a line off the table.
Oh, I intend to, I say, and I walk out back towards the university and the theology department.
It only takes you about 15, 20 minutes to retrace your steps back to the Miskatonic campus, which was not too far from where you got off the bus. And it's, very different looking campus, but in the same way it has like a even more old school Gothic. The buildings are quite old for the most part, and so rather than modern buildings like most of the ones in Cascadia City, these seem to be older buildings made of stone. This used to be a religious university. It's no longer specifically identified as that, but most of these buildings are like, made of stone with like old Gothic type architecture.
So I approach the stone steps to the largest building that has some indication that it's the theology department, and look for a light on inside, somewhere up on a higher floor.
So you move through the campus, and you pass various departments, the Department of English Language Arts and Linguistic Studies and the study of dead languages, anthropology, archaeology, and finally you find yourself to the theology wing of the campus. And this seems to be actually the original building around which the other buildings were eventually built. But this was the original school that was on this land long ago, the theology department. And it still says in a carving above the door, Trinity Baptist College, but you understand that this has now been subsumed into this larger campus. Nevertheless, this is the theology department. There's wooden doors, and you do indeed see that there are some lights on inside the building, as well as some of the other buildings nearby. There's also like a electronic doorbell with like a little speaker beside the door.
So I approach the door and look inside for any signs of life or unlife, and then give the quaint doorbell a ring.
So a moment later, you just hear a female voice say, "Hello?"
Yes, hello, I'm new in town. Thought that this would be a good place to seek refuge for a few hours.
There's silence for a moment, then they say, "Are you looking for someone in particular?"
Yes, one, Madame Ashara.
So there's silence on the other end of the line, and then the little intercom box blinks green 3 times, and you hear a sound like a door unlocking.
In rhythm with the unlocking of the hinge of the door, I open and step through. Looking for... Go ahead.
You step through into an atrium space, and there's stairwells leading up on the left and on the right. There's some potted plants in the corners of the room in front of the windows that lead in. And in the middle of between the 2 stairs, there's sort of like a stained glass installation of just a cross, a golden cross against like red glass background. There's nobody standing here though. It's empty.
I take a moment and stare at the crucifix here. Wait for any sounds of people approaching. And if there are none, I will look for some sort of directory that would indicate office, locations, numbers, names, etc.
So on the left wall, there is a sort of a plaque of sorts with brown metal with elevated letters, and it lists a number of professors. And you do see one that says Professor Emeritus Divinity, PhD, Ashara Sandrosia, Sandrosia, and it says on the 3rd floor. It says room 3B.
I take the stairs up to the 3rd floor and walk out into the hallway.
So at the top of every flight of stairs, there is like a gargoyle on both sides of like the stairwell set into the walls, like Gothic style gargoyles. And you walk past them to the 3rd floor, and you see a door that is marked 3B, and it says on it Professor Ashara Androsia, and it seems to be open a crack with a light inside.
I creak the door open slowly and stand in the doorway without entering myself and announce my presence with a hello.
So inside, the room is lit by old school lanterns that are have fire inside of them, right? But they're not candles, nor are they electric lights. They're like lanterns. The whole entire back wall is a bookshelf covered in thick leather-bound books. There's a desk and a chair, like an office chair. And sitting in the office chair is an attractive woman who you recognize as the woman who is presiding over the ritual that you interrupted in Cascadia City not 24 hours ago. She has black hair, very white skin, very dark eyes, almost look black. And she's wearing a black dress, black high heel shoes. She has her feet crossed and her hands folded in her lap, and she's looking at the door as though she was expecting you. And she says, Shad Viano Feroth of Host Tremere, freshly arrived from Cascadia City. What a surprise. Welcome. What brings you to our domain?
Well, I'm here on a not unimportant mission. Are you familiar with King Rat back in G-City?
He laughs, a sort of high-pitched, elegant laugh, but somewhat derisive. And she says, oh yes, I'm very familiar with King Rat, the Lord of the Sewers of Cascadia, but a useful source of information. She smiles. He's told me many interesting things about you, as a matter of fact.
I'm sure he has. In addition to being Lord of the Sewers, he's also been a veritable thorn in my side. You know, he's tried to steal from me before. A very important book. I say in a challenging tone.
He smiles and says, well, I know that you are raised on the milk toast of the ivory tower, but here we follow a somewhat different philosophy. You see, according to our ideology, knowledge is power, and only the worthy deserve to hold power. Therefore, only the worthy deserve to hold knowledge. From what I've been told, you are a source of knowledge for many factions in Cascadia City. Perhaps you have useful information for me as well.
Well, I consider myself far more of a knowledge seeker than somebody who trades in it, but there's plenty of use that I can have.
She looks at you thoughtfully and nods and says, well, if you seek knowledge, certainly we have extensive libraries, including what you might call private collections. But we don't open the doors to the secret archives to just anybody. So if you are seeking knowledge, you can find it easily enough in the campus libraries. But I intuit that you're seeking a particular kind of knowledge, the kind of knowledge that the Kine are not permitted to gaze on freely.
That's right. And even that kind that the kindred of the Ivory Tower refuse to indulge themselves in and pursue with vigor. I recently become convinced of a few deeper prophecies, both their existence and what they might potentially state about the coming days. If what they say is true, I'm compelled by reason alone to join you in this city. No use clinging to a masquerade that will be unmasked.
He smiles, but you cannot read the sincerity or the expression in her eyes. And she says, don't you think it's strange that the Camarilla works so hard to collect scraps of ancient knowledge and lore only to turn around and tell their followers that it's just superstition and that they don't need to pay any attention to it? Doesn't it seem a little bit too convenient that they gather and hoard knowledge, but at the same time downplay its significance to their lapdogs. Perhaps you are truly what you say you are, a seeker of truth. But perhaps you have heard the old expression, be careful what you look for, because you might just find it. And another expression that you may have heard, if you stare long enough into the abyss will stare back into you.
Stares back into you, I say, overlapping my words with hers. Yes, well, I have spent too long staring into nothing but tomes, and a glimpse of the abyss in this unlife will be more precious than an eternity in parchment.
She smiles at you again, and this time you sense that there's some genuine mirth or amusement in her expression. And she says, if it is access to our secret archives that you seek, that can perhaps be arranged, but first you must offer me something in return. What can you tell me of the events occurring in Cascadia City, and particularly any information about the Prince, Govind Singh, or the Sheriff, David Wingate? Can you give us any information about the ongoing machinations of the Ivory Tower in Cascadia City?
Certainly. I begin describing kind of the overall structure of power politics and physical locations in the city, just to make sure I'm covering all my bases, although I assume that she knows most of this already, so I'm moving pretty quickly. And then I begin to explain the more recent details. And as you know, Ashara, the Setites are splitting to some degree. There are those who wish to stay truly independent, and others that wish to protect the masquerade. And seeing you here, I suppose there are some that want to join this side as well. So their power may be fracturing. The Brujah, as always, started some sort of petty insurrection, not anything that the Prince probably can't handle, but there's been a recent embarrassment for him in the turning of one Michael Williams, a low-generation vampire that was turned by a gangrel only a fortnight ago. And I explained that situation and its recent resolution. But things as they are proceeding along with some level of regularity and a few cracks, but some obviously significant betrayals of the law of domain, with a Tremere being murdered in his own chantry. I say with, again, a pregnant pause, looking for any clues of Sabbat involvement in that. As well as Sabbat members operating publicly in the Pyramid nightclub, and the independent clan seeming to refocus on their own interests, and each clan weaving their own plots against the other. It seems like a real house of cards, I say.
He smiles knowingly in acknowledgement of that metaphor and says, "Do you know this city was not always Sabbat territory? Not long ago, the Camarilla claimed exclusive domain over this city as well. And yet, we have chased them from here because, as you have probably ascertained, there is a shifting in the winds of the night. Even the most ignorant and young generation vampires can feel it, something in the air. Things are changing and accelerating, and you are not the first Camarilla to realize that the promise of the masquerade is a false one. The Kine already know that the kindred exist. They hunt us, and they will continue to hunt us as these later nights pass on in time. However, we are not as concerned with the governments of the Kine, which we have significant control over. The true risk and threat to all Kine is the rising of the antediluvians. Despite the lies that you've been fed by the Camarilla, The Book of Nod is the truth. One only needs the correct keys to unfold the secrets therein. But those who are truly initiated into the ways of darkness and the path of Cain understand that we are truly living in the final moments of jihad. And if we are to rise and claim what is ours by birthright, the time is surely now. The Camarilla is a eroding facade, like you say, a crumbling house of cards, and all it takes is the right card to be removed, and the Camarilla will fall in Cascadia City, as they have in Arcadia. Perhaps you can help us to locate and remove that card. And if you do, Ordo Abkeo, we can create a new order. But first we must create chaos. Do you understand?
Oh, I understand well, and have even taken a few initial steps on such a path. In fact, I think I know exactly the right plan. And can I get a 5-minute bathroom break real quick?
Yep.
All right, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Okay, so I take a seat across the desk from Ashara and begin to lay out all my cards on the table and tell her of a grand strategy that I've been working on, detailing where the risks are and are not, and where the progress has started and where it needs to have some threads pulled on it. But first and foremost, what I'm offering is subterfuge. I will bring out any secrets from the Tremere Chantry that would potentially be useful to the Sabbat, particularly in cross-referencing texts where there may be an incompleteness of materials on their side that we have access to. I'm also offering to hand over at least two pretty significant players. None of the top people, but so one of the sheriff's agents, Callan, as well as the most notable Toreador, Elizabeth Fairbrooks, one of her so-called daughters, Lucy, and these can be used for ransom or for some other purpose that we can scheme up together. But essentially the idea is get the Ventru and the Toreador to feud with each other while the other independent clans go either independent or break off from the Camarilla, like the Gangrel, who are kind of already on the fence. Because if the Toreador and the Ventru are at odds, the whole thing falls apart. They're basically the only two putting together the facade of the city, and some of the top agents I could deliver. So it's kind of like one of the main harpies right-hand girl and one of the main sheriff's right-hand guys.
He pauses and seems to consider carefully everything that you're saying, but it only seems to take her a few seconds, and she nods and says, "You offer to deliver a valuable prize indeed. Your loyalty will have to be proven. In the Sabbat, we have a system of initiation, one which all Sabbat must proceed through. And in due time, you will be given your chance to be initiated as well if what you promise proves true. But for now, if you can deliver what you have offered, I can offer in return access to our secret library. In return, you will make good on your offer, and we will consider you a undercover agent within the Camarilla to keep us informed of the schemes of the Toreador and the machinations of the Ventrue in particular, as well as any other information that you can offer us that would be valuable. But if you can lure some of the whelps of the Toreador and the Ventrue into Arcadia City, then perhaps we would indeed be able to find precisely the right card to pull to topple the Ivory Tower in Cascadia City, a project that we have been working on for some time now.
They will offer themselves willingly, pretending to take cover as double agents. I hope that doesn't arise any suspicion in my behavior here. I intended to weave this plot long before their involvement came. It would be beneficial to me because these two would be off of my back and I could operate more efficiently as a double agent for the Sabbat in their city, much like they would want to pretend to do here.
She nods thoughtfully and says, "Very well, let it be as you have said, and perhaps you shall reap the rewards of loyal service." You see, unlike the Camarilla, we do not simply feed table scraps to the dogs that serve us. In the Sabbat, everyone is equal. We are all together sons of Cain and lords of the night. Rather than the petty politics of the Ivory Tower, we work together to take what is ours and rise to our due station. Long before even you were embraced, some hundreds of years ago, already our faction was old and powerful. We ruled Assyria and Babylon and Sumeria long before even the records of the kind begin. The Camarilla try to present themselves as the orthodoxy and the established and trustworthy political face of the kindred, but in truth, they are the usurpers of an ancient bloodline, an ancient and powerful bloodline. If you choose to align yourself with the true powers of the night, then you must make the necessary sacrifices, and you must be willing to sacrifice whatever is asked of you. She reaches into her desk and pulls out a sort of old school, ornate, very large metal key, and puts it on the desk in front of you and says, "This will unlock our secret Cainite and Nodite archives. You may browse them at your leisure, but you will be under observation while you're within our archives and our library. But make haste to complete the agreement, and perhaps in due time you will find what it is that you truly seek."
Thank you, Shara. Just let me know what I can do to be helpful, and I'll continue building this plan from the inside out in G City.
He smiles and says, "Very well. You have made your choice, and it was a wise one, but your fidelity remains to be seen. A promise broken in the Sabbat is more than a contract. It is a blood oath." And she says, "Would you be willing to enter into a blood pact now as a sign of your faith and goodwill?"
Perhaps. I would like to be fully informed. It's never a great idea to sign up for these things hastily. I know that this is somewhat different than those agreements made with our lizard friends in the clan of Set, but never know what you're going to get when you bargain with the devil. So, perhaps you could tell me more about this oath.
About what, sorry?
The oath that she's asking me to take.
She says, "In the Sabbat, we are predators, and we accept our identity as predators. And predators that hunt in packs are more powerful than lone wolves. So there is a tradition among the Sabbat. We mingle our vitae and drink it together, and by doing so, we solidify our oaths of loyalty to one another. You see, words are wind. Anyone can lie. Kindred lie more than kind. But the blood never lies. The blood always speaks the truth, she says. Do you understand? And she reaches, as she's saying that, she reaches into her desk and pulls out like a pewter cup, like a small chalice.
I do. Unfortunately, ma'am, I got bad news. My vitae, it's not fertile. And I don't suppose it would be useful in this ritual.
She says,
Only made it school once, and it was a long time ago, and I wasn't even so sure that he was loyal because of the blood. I think he just convinced himself into it. But I've never been able to turn another kindred. And I know that my blood is not fertile in that way. Although powerful and old, it is not fertile.
She nods and says, we do not seek to create a new scion in the night. The world is already infested with weak-blooded vampires that need to be purged. Only those of the true blood deserve to inherit the night. However, it is not the fertility of your blood that matters. It is simply the ritual, the compact. You will mix your blood with mine, and together we will drink, and by drinking seal our agreement. And she takes out like a sharp letter opener from her desk and makes like a small cut in her hand and drips like a small amount of blood into the cup. And then she offers you the cup and the knife. And she says, cut yourself, bleed, and together we shall drink to a new partnership.
I examine the knife for a moment. Are there any inscriptions or gems in it that speak to its purpose that she might not be telling me that I can intuit?
All you can tell by looking at the knife is that it is very old. It has an ornate, intricately designed handle, but it doesn't seem to have any specific magical or occult markings on it, other than sort of like a Celtic knot type like design, like on the handle.
A beautiful piece, I say, and I mention, I remember when these barbarian tribes were just that. Before the kindred conquered that area, there was some gangrel back in the times when these runes were made. But history has a way of continuing to march on, wouldn't you say, Ashara?
She says, history reaches towards a conclusion. History is teleological. There is a direction to history. The weak suffer and the strong prosper. And then she seems to be in sort of almost like a trance-like state, and she says, indeed, from he who has little all shall be taken, even what little he has, but to them who have much more shall be given, even unto abundance. And she smiles and offers you the cup and the knife.
I cock my head, somewhat recognizing the words, and take the knife, slit my wrist, and look at her as my blood pours into the cup, mixing with hers.
All right. So she smiles again, and it's a very like sort of beguiling smile. She's very beautiful and has like a strange regal air to her. You can kind of tell by her facial structure and her composure that she kind of resonates a sense of royalty, and she takes the intermingled blood and takes a sip of it before offering it to you with both hands.
I take it in kind with both hands, raise it even a little bit before knocking back an equally sized sip.
So the intermingled vitae sort of burns as it goes down your throat, but it's not an unpleasant burning. It's like a burning of like power. And you can tell that her blood is more potent than yours because you are feeding on like a lower generation vampire's blood. So you can restore a blood point, and we'll even say like add a point of blood potency for 24 hours. But as you drink it, you feel a sense of trust, and you see that her already impressive physical beauty seems amplified somehow, and you feel a sense of being bonded to her by this ritual. She smiles and says, "A contract sealed in blood is more than a contract, but a covenant. And a covenant broken is wrath unleashed. So I will trust for your own well-being that you do not seek to sell lies to the Sabbat, because we have an ancient system for punishing traitors, and we can inflict pain upon pain. And for those who never die, an eternity of pain is, as you may have heard, a long time to suffer."
Indeed. I don't intend to die or put myself through that any time. If there's one thing you can depend on, it's my own self-interest.
She grins at that, showing her fangs, and says, "Well, perhaps you truly do have the makings of a Sabbat. We shall see. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you should return to Cascadia City before your absence is noted. There are many eyes watching your actions, and many whispers circulating, not just in Cascadia City, but far and wide. So tread carefully, and remember that you are playing a very dangerous game. And should you fall in the pursuit of the jihad, I doubt anyone will shed any tears for you."
Don't worry, I wouldn't expect them to. But you're right, I'll be off. And I'll be back soon enough to investigate this library. Thank you for the key, I say, putting it in my pocket.
She nods and also slides you a small card. It's black with gold writing on it, and it contains her full name, her office at the Miskatonic University, and a phone number. And she says, "Very well then. The time has come for you to depart while the night is still young. And remember, deeds done in the darkness will often be brought to light. So you must learn to walk in the shadows and conceal not only your actions, but your intentions. But I see that you are experienced in the machinations of our kind, and so I shall trust your discretion until I am given reason to doubt it."
My own life hasn't been this long for no reason, I say with a deep bow. Thank you, Ishara. It was a pleasure to become initiated, and I'll walk out, leave, take the bus, head back to the campus, and then when I get off at the campus, wait at the party in the quad that should be getting started any moment.
Very well. So you return on the bus through the wilderness to Cascadia City, depart the bus, and return to the quad to await the beginning of the party that Sid Rogers indicated would be taking place tonight. And I guess we'll stop your session here.
Nice.
And we will disconnect the bot. Anybody listening, you can find all of our past episodes on YouTube and BitChute, Temple Mount Official, Temple Mount Podcast, or just join the Temple Mount Discord server and join the game yourself. Thank you, Mr. Shad, and God bless everybody. Good night.